As a supermodel, actress, and health expert, I've traveled the world, and I have learned that no two people share the same story. My name's Carol Alt, and in my living room, you'll hear the stories that have shaped some of the most successful people in their industries. Welcome to Carol Alt's Living Room. From beauty to fashion and everything in between, Manuel has truly done it all. How did he become so successful? Find out here on Carol Alt's Living Room. Hi, I'm Carol Alt, and welcome to Carol's Living Room, where we're talking to fashion innovators, creatives, and just about anybody who's iconic in the industry. Today we're talking to I wanted to say Manuel.
I know.
But you call yourself Manuel.
Manuel. Well, actually,
tell me why that is.
Well, you know, I think because most people assume, they look at me and my skin color and they say, oh, he's Spanish, so it's Manuel. But I'm actually not Spanish at all, and I don't speak Spanish, which is terrible. It's a South African last name. It's not a Spanish, which is Manuel, or Manuel is a Spanish first or middle name. So I pronounce it Manuel, which is a South African last name, and then
You're
with their
having to
accent,
correct a lot of people because everybody in this
actually, I don't ever correct anybody. I just let them go with it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no.
No proprietary feelings over the last name.
Well, as long as they spell it correctly, that's all I care about.
As long as they call the right number.
Yeah, there you go.
So you're actually born in Canada.
Well, you know, there's like this big misconception,
okay,
and it's one of those things that's been really hard to clear up on the internet because everyone thinks I was born and raised in Toronto. I did grow up in Toronto.
No, but I thought you were born in Canada, but you were brought up in Springfield.
I was the other way around. I was actually born in Springfield, which I don't remember at all, Springfield, Illinois, and moved to Toronto when I was very, very young. So
tell me about your childhood in Toronto. Were your parents Canadian or American?
My parents came from South Africa.
They came from South, but
yes.
So did they consider themselves Canadian then?
Yes,
you
yes,
brought up
absolutely.
in Toronto.
So yeah, so they moved to the U.S. My sister and I were born in the U.S. and then they moved to Canada. That was their goal. They wanted to live there, and
so the other misconception is you were adopted. You're not adopted.
Yes, I am adopted. A lot of people don't know that. I've talked about it here and there. It's not something that for me. I grew up with this feeling of, I don't know, it was normal for me. I think there's a huge misconception with when people talk about children who are adopted, that they feel like they don't belong, they weren't a part of the family, they need to know their parents. And I did talk about this actually. I think the first time I ever really spoke about it was with Barbara Walters because her daughter's adopted. And we got into a conversation on air about adoption because I think people just, they just think, they always think that someone who is adopted really struggles with where they fit. And I felt the opposite. My upbringing was different. We were always told, I don't remember being told. It's like your birthday. It's like, you just know it's your birthday. It was the same way I just knew I was adopted. My mom could not have children. And at that time, it was very difficult. Moving from South Africa to the US, and you're talking about in the 70s, it was really difficult for people of color to adopt. And my parents are like a mixed race, and in the US, it was very much about, okay, you can't have a white child at that time, you can't have a black child, it has to be someone who looks like you. And it was kind of built into the institution.
Wow, don't you just dislike that?
I know, it sounds ridiculous to talk about it in 2018, but that's what it was.
Because there's so many great parents who would want their children and they can't have them because it's not the right color or it's so crazy to me. And here are these children who need homes.
Yeah, and nowadays it's great because obviously we don't have
we don't care anymore.
We don't care anymore, but back then in the early 70s they did care. And so it took my parents about 6 years. And so it was great. My sister and I are 14 months apart. So they were just kind of blessed. They got a boy and a girl. And so I kind of felt like I was the wanted child, I guess. And I really look at it as a blessing. I feel like our whole life is a journey that you can never question what that journey is. And so for me, someone else carried me for 9 months, but my parents are my parents. So I always saw it as that. And I never, even sitting here today at 45, I've never thought or had the urge to say, oh, I need to know who my birth parents were.
So you never seek them out?
No, never did. And never had never had the desire. My sister was more curious when she started having children herself, because her adoption file was a little incomplete with her father's information. And ironically, it was actually Catholic Charities who contacted, through my management company, me, because they were trying to find my sister. My sister took her husband's name, so they couldn't track her down.
Of course, yeah.
And so she's actually met her mother, and that was interesting. So my sister and I kind of sat together, and I said, "So what is that like? Is it like now? Do you send Christmas cards? Like what? Like what's the protocol?
Do you
like
call
what do
on
you
the
do?"
birthday?
Yeah, you don't. And so I think they don't really have a relationship, but she got the information she needs, and they kind of.
What information did she need?
I guess she just wanted to know for herself. My sister's I come from a family of doctors. My sister is a doctor. Her husband is a vascular surgeon. So they wanted to know very specifically health issues, especially just because in my brother-in-law's family there are cancer things that run. So they just wanted to know, what runs in the family really.
So never had any desire. I always wondered about the parents actually in that situation, because here you adopt a child, you give it all this love, and then at some point it goes, I want to know my real parents. It must be such a slap in the face.
I think if you're in that situation, my parents were very open with both my sister and I from such a young age. And, it's one of the blessings when I always look at my parents, I think like they were the blessing, for me. They always said, listen, if you ever have any questions, you ever want to go, find out information, we'll support you, we'll go with you, we'll do this together. And so that was given to us really when we were very young. So we always knew there was never going to be this thing if we said, oh, we want to meet, our birth parents. And so for me, I just never, I just didn't want to question it. My parents are amazing. They have been so supportive and accepting of everything I've wanted to do in my life, and I just never had the curiosity. And what's interesting is it's illegal for the birth parents to seek out the child.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, especially when it's a legal state adoption. However, there's an organization that keeps current information that they have to choose to register into. And I found out my birth mother is registered in that program.
But you never went forward with that.
Yeah, so basically that program always keeps current information wherever she is.
So it's there if you ever want to.
Yeah, you never know.
So you said you came up in a family of doctors, and at one point you wanted to be a doctor.
Yes.
Did you want to be a doctor because you want to be a doctor, or because they were like, everybody's a doctor, you got to be a doctor?
No, it was actually the opposite. My dad said, are you sure? My dad is a kidney specialist, and he said, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I was always so fascinated by science. My first, I remember like my big summer job I got when I was in school. Of course, my dad got me the job at the hospital, was working in the biochem lab. Oh. And my job was real simple. Literally, the blood vials all come in. You have to put them in the centrifuge, spin down the red blood cells, pour off the serum, and that's it. And the coolest thing I ever got to do was for blood gases when they would have to be pulled from a patient in surgery.
What's a blood gas?
So they can pull. They want to know the blood gas levels of the patient.
Like oxygen or carbon monoxide.
I don't really remember, to be honest with you. But all I know is that someone else would do the test.
Nitrous oxide.
Whatever the test was, they would give me a list, and then you'd have to kind of call into the PA that goes, over the loudspeaker in the operating theater. Room. And yes, I would read off the values on a sheet. That's all. And I thought I was so cool and so important.
Well, so how did you make the jump to fashion?
So fashion is interesting. It's one of those things that was purely a passion. And my parents, my mother coming from the arts, she was a teacher, but a musician. Both my parents really nurtured the creative sides of both my sister and I.
Because you were actually a writer first. You liked to write.
I did. How did you know that? That's crazy.
It's my job to know that, honey.
I did, and that's going to come full circle in our conversation probably. And I loved fashion, and I guess if you went to a 13-year-old Jay's bedroom, normally you would see, like your favorite musical artists on the wall and all that kind of stuff. I had, all the fashion ads. All the iconic ones of the time in the 80s, all over the walls.
And I remember mine?
I had pictures of everyone. Yes, and I wasn't going to say it, but yes, I had pictures of you. I could think Iman, like everybody was on my wall. And I tell this story now and then, which is I had Saks Fifth Avenue ads up there, but I grew up in Toronto, so I didn't know what Saks was. We didn't have Saks then. We have it there now. So I always never knew what it was. So I kind of made up this narrative of what Saks was. So really it was just a passion. And I really studied photographers. You know, I was very into what Herbert's was doing and Avedon and Scavullo. And at that time I remember saying, my God, it was a dream. It would be a dream to work with someone like Scavullo. It would be a dream to work with Herbert's. But it was not a cool thing to just go off and work in the fashion world. And what was I going to do? Did I want to be a photographer? You know, I just
stylist, hair and makeup.
Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So
a lot of doors that could open for someone.
Absolutely, and that's what I talk to so many young kids today about. I think they even still they don't even realize there are so many jobs in fashion that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
So I love science, and I excelled at it. So it fascinated me, and I thought that's what I had to do. And it was literally, I was accepted to the University of Toronto.
And NYU.
Well, eventually it was NYU, but I started off, going the science route in Canada.
Oh,
and then
you actually stepped into that.
Well, I applied, I was accepted, I was getting ready to go to school, and that summer I said to my parents, I said, I don't think this is, the path that I'm supposed to be on.
I'm not excited about this.
And I had traveled extensively with my parents, but we never came as a whole family to New York City. And I had the opportunity to come to New York with my music teacher at the time.
What were you studying in music?
I went through the Royal Conservatory as a pianist.
Holy cow, you really are a jack of all trades.
Yeah, kind of. And I had sung in the Mendelssohn Choir and traveled around the world as a singer and a soloist. And I was young.
At what age?
I started at 13.
Wow.
So by the time I was around 18, or really 17, my private voice teacher had me sing for her voice teacher in New York. So with permission of my parents, I flew down with her, and I remember I fell in love with the city. And it was literally this gut reaction of,
yeah.
Oh my God, I belong here. I have to be here. And I think people, when you know you belong, you belong. But I didn't really want to tell my parents that at the time. And during that year, we flew down about 3 times, and I studied with her teacher. And I went to the Metropolitan Opera, and I just remember the whole experience and thinking, this is where I need to be. And I told my parents that, and I just was really shocked. They just said, that's what you need to do. Let's do this.
Wow, supportive.
Tuition wasn't paid yet.
Right.
So literally my parents said, it's too late to apply to NYU, but I applied going into the second semester, but I came to New York that fall, and I kind of went into a far more regimented, strict program of voice and diction and language.
Well,
and
it's
went
better
into my
than
own
what
school.
You could have done, which is come here and party and hang out and really lose it.
Well, my first voice teacher actually kind of was my chaperone in a weird way.
Okay,
Because my parents got me an apartment to live in, and she came down because she was cast in Martin Scorsese's Age of Innocence.
Oh.
And she was not only cast to be, portray an opera singer, she also, they actually used her real voice. And so when you watch the movie, she's the first person you see. And throughout the movie, she has a few parts. So they were shooting just outside New York. She came and stayed with me. It was a great experience. It was like the most surreal way of moving into New York.
So what kind of singing did you do? You actually did opera, I
was a full lyric tenor, and that's what I was studying to do. Keep in mind, I was still holding the whole fashion thing just kind of as a passion inside of me. And of course, now I'm in the city of fashion, and where you get to experience and see people. And when I was still at home, though, before I went to New York, I realized I loved photography. So it's a long story, but I'll shorten it. I talked my way into the photography club because I was too young at high school. And the photography teacher there saw kind of this glint in my eye and said, sure. And then, of course, I studied photography at school. And by the time I was 17, she encouraged me to enter some of my work into the National Kodak competition.
I remember that competition.
And
yes.
I won. and one year, and it was great. I used all that money to buy a Mamiya camera and all these film backs, and my parents then kind of bought me used and larger equipment and everything, and I set up my own darkroom. And so I had a passion for this, but it was just a hobby.
Right.
Just a hobby. And then when I was in New York, it was really, how do I just deny this? I went to NYU, and I was still studying music privately.
And you were writing in NYU.
Yes.
So you were doing like two things. Creative yet completely different.
Yes, completely different. I had let go of the science thing. So I was in the Gallatin division at NYU. And when The Age of Innocence was getting ready to do all of their marketing and everything for that film, it was an epic, award-winning film at the time, they wanted, stills of Linda, not in character, but as a regular person. So they sent her to this huge photographer who shoots for all of the Deutsche Grammophon, Sony Classics, and all the Met recordings, because they wanted like a classical photographer to shoot this opera singer. And she asked me, just because my hobby was like telling her how to dress and how to do her makeup. Like I was the art directing her look all the time. I'm like, you're a beautiful.
You were styling her.
She's a stunning woman, and she would kind of dress really kind of dowdy. And I said, no, you got to put this on and that on. So she said, would you come get me ready for this shoot? And I said, sure. And so I went to the shoot, and the photographer, Christian Steiner, said, you're really talented at this. And I was so naive. I said, oh, no. I'm a serious singer. I go to school. This is not what I do.
Right.
And I, looking back at it, he kind of chuckled at me, this really naive young kid, and said, yeah, well, if you ever feel like you want to earn some extra money or whatever, give me a call. Not really realizing the level of work that he did. And so a few months later, you're at school and you think, wow, I could really use some extra money.
Cash, yeah.
So I called him up, and he laughed, and I said, so this is my class schedule. I can only work this day and this day.
He said, what, are you kidding?
So literally, he booked me for this shoot with this famous Russian soprano, and I knew who she was, so I thought it was a really big deal. And so I did this shoot. I did a great job. I just did her makeup.
You did the makeup.
Did her makeup. That's what I was doing.
Well, you started out doing makeup on your baby sister, so you had kind of like
just fooling around. I had no training.
Yeah, but fooling around is where a lot of people start serious business.
Yeah, it was just purely
passion.
Yeah, it was just passion and an eye. And so I did her makeup. She loved her look. They were very, very happy. And he said to me, okay, great. Can you work next week? I said, sure. He said, I'm doing a CD cover for the Metropolitan Opera. I said, okay. We're doing a character cover. I said, okay, sure, I can do character work. I'm just like totally blowing it out. Fake it till you make it, right?
Fake it till you make it.
Then they said, do you work with lace front wigs? I'm not a hairdresser. Still to this day, I'm not a hairdresser.
Did you know what a lace front wig was?
I knew what a lace front wig was, but I never worked with them and didn't know how fussy they were to work with.
Yes.
So of course I said yes. Oh yeah, I can do that.
No problem.
So he says, great, we're working with Luciano Pavarotti, and we're doing him in a cover. So instantly in that moment, I just freaked out, because he was a bit of an idol of mine.
I would think so, since you sung opera yourself.
And he was somewhat notorious for his behavior. And my musical coach, who was the assistant conductor at the Metropolitan Opera at the time, actually was the person who taught a lot of the musical scores to Luciano, because he couldn't read music. People didn't know that. So
wait. Luciano couldn't read music?
Couldn't read music at all. At all. So everything was coached to him, lyrically. Yeah. I mean, of course, he could read the Italian, but he couldn't read the music.
The music.
Yeah. So any new score, he was taught. And so here I was like instantly nervous. So then next thing I know, I was like thrown into this world. The Metropolitan Opera is messengering me his custom lace wig for this character role. And I didn't know what to do, so
I didn't know what to do with it.
I literally went to the yellow pages. There were, the internet was not that great at the time. And then I looked up, wig makers in New York, and I just called up. I said, "Hi, I need help." I literally went to
hightailed it over there
to this guy who was amazing, and I think he just saw this little kid just
way out of his
out of his league, and he taught me how to block a lace front wig on a form and how to set it. So in doing so, he basically set the wig per this character sketch they gave me, And so I kind of winged my way through this shoot. And with all the celebrities I've worked with in my entire career, I'd never been really nervous or freaked out, but this one shoot, because I was so young and he was a musical idol of mine, and and I was doing everything that was new, like working with lace glue and all this kind of stuff. He just said, my boy, let me show you. And he taught me these little tricks. And I remember that. It was just such a great experience.
So basically you were lucky that he knew how to work with a lace front wig.
Yeah, well, he also had all these other weird, quirky things he wanted done with his makeup. I was like, okay, like he brought it was like a wine cork. He took it out of a coal, like a Ziploc bag with coal in it. And he wanted his eyebrows darkened with that for the character role as I was drawing the contour and he wanted coal in his eyebrows.
That is something I've never heard of before.
Yeah, coal.
Because there's so much makeup out there that can do that.
And I had pigments and everything,
yeah.
but he wanted his old school, stage technique. I was like, we'll go with that.
Sometimes people have things that are just good luck.
Yeah. So that's my really odd way I got into the business, because I started doing more kind of very well-known people all through Christian Steiner's studio. And then an agent saw my work and I said, I want to move into fashion.
A makeup agent?
Yes. He said, I want to move into fashion. I decided, makeup was something that it just was natural to me. I could do kind of anything. What do you want? Let me see a picture. Okay, I can do that. And that's really how I got into makeup. I didn't assist anybody big. It wasn't that way, and which is really, as we know, still today, to kind of get in certain doors, you really need to kind of go in the assistant route somewhat. And then I literally just lucked out with certain key people I got to work on. And really that happened through, I remember my first day walking into Vogue with my portfolio to meet an editor to really do their celebrity portraits. And then they liked my work. I ended up doing the celebrity portraits every month for Vogue for a long period of time. Wow. But that's how I met celebrity clients, and then very quickly started kind of working with a lot of different models and actresses. And then from there, I wanted to do beauty advertising, but no one would let me do it.
What do you mean? You worked for Vogue, Harper's Bazaar. I think you worked for Mary Claire.
Yeah. No one would let me do beauty advertising.
Why? That would be the natural success.
Yeah. You could have the best hairs in your book, and they'd say, this is great, but he's not done advertising, or what. This is what the creative directors would say at the time. It frustrated me to no end, because I'm like, it's a catch-22. If I don't have a beauty ad in my book, now you're not going to let me do beauty. And that was just, kind of at the time, it was a little bit of that. And
but wait, you were also working with top photographers.
Yeah.
They couldn't get you in the door?
Well, I think the art directors at the time, they just really wanted people who were so used to a certain kind of beat and a rhythm. And I'd not done major advertising like that. And that was always a goal of mine. And so what I did was I actually did a cover with Bridget Moynihan. And she was such a bit of an it girl at the time, and now she's an actress. And I said to her, we just clicked and we had a lot of fun. And I said, listen, you're the last person who needs a test. So Matthew Ralston said he would do this shoot for me that looks like a beauty ad. And I said, look, we've got an amazing photographer set up, amazing team. I'm going to replicate beauty ads, but I'm not faking them with cover lines, but we're going to lay it out, put product in there, and show that I can do this. And so I had been turned down for a big Revlon campaign. And so I did this shoot with her, and I put these 3 double-page ads, fake ads, but they looked great, the front of all my tear sheets. Sent it right, I forced my agent to send it right back to the creative director. And then he wanted a meeting with me. And so when I showed up, he basically said, so why'd you do this? And I said, because I just don't understand why no one will look at my work for advertising.
I don't understand. If you're doing beauty for all the top magazines, what difference is it if you put a product in there? Can you explain it? I mean, did you ever figure it out?
I never figured it out. I was really, I didn't get bitter. I just said, I'm gonna find a way. And so that's how I found a way. And he said, you know what?
He said, we love your creativity.
Yeah, he said, well, you know what? I'm gonna give you the job. And that's how I booked my first Revlon campaign. And then from there, I started working with other big advertisers and worked my way up and doing big things and campaigns for like De Beers.
But you ended up working with all your idols. All those people that you had those pictures on the wall, Francesco Scavullo and Avedon, you worked with everybody.
I worked with all of them, and Annie Leibovitz and all of them. And the Scavullo shoot almost didn't happen because by the time I was really working as a major makeup artist, Scavullo really, he was so much older, not shooting.
Yeah.
And it was actually Carrie Diamond when she was at
Harper's.
At Harper's. She called me one day and she said,
she was great. I liked her.
She's an amazing person, beautiful spirit.
Yes.
And she said, oh, so we're doing a shoot, and I just want to let you know we're booking you for the shoot. And I remember thinking at the time, it's so weird, like you're calling me to tell me this. And she said, oh yeah, I just wanted to personally tell you that we're doing the shoot with Scavullo. Because she knew that was a dream, and I thought I would never get a chance to work with him. So I shot with him once, that one time. And it was the most amazing experience to get to shoot with him. And I was doing makeup in the back, and he came back, and he was just, he's like, this is so beautiful, and you paint like an illustrator, and you remind me of my late great friend Way Bandy. And I mean, like, that to me was like the ultimate compliment.
By the way, I worked with both.
Oh, well, there you go.
And Scavullo.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to get a
Harry King.
And of course, at the time I was like, no. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like Way Bandy. And he's like, no. And it was.
You have a spirit like Way Bandy, though. I have to say, when you walked in, the way you carry yourself, how you groom yourself, Way was impeccable.
Oh wow.
I mean, right down to the last detail. Literally, it looks like you take a ruler to your beard. I mean, it's like, I have never seen anybody groomed like you.
My trick is, I never had a beard. My entire life I was clean shaven, and when I grew this beard about a year ago, I don't like it. It doesn't work messy on me. I like messy beards on men. So I actually use like a depilatory to create the edge. I do it myself.
Oh my God, there's no machine that could do that?
No, because then you see the stubble, it looks weird, so.
What happens if the depilatory gets in the wrong place?
No, it's like a cream.
Yeah,
so
I know what it is.
So you literally just like lay it in. It's not that hard.
That is awesome, because then of course it takes longer to grow back too, so you get a double-edged
I don't have to shave for like, I don't have to worry about it for a few days. And then I can wear stubbly. It doesn't matter.
But you remind me very much of Way, so yeah, I can understand why he said that to you.
Yeah, so that was a great experience.
So now we're moving into, that's the 90s, of course. Because
90s or into 2000,
yeah. Because Scavullo died late 90s, I think, right? And then, so like 2003, you had a big career boost. Tell me what happened.
So, yeah, a lot of people are very aware of a little show I might have been on, America's Next Top Model.
Yeah, not very well known, but we'll force it.
That's a funny story because, I started working with Tyra, late 90s, and really the way I had met Tyra before, very briefly, but the way I actually started working with her was, and she loves to say this, she's the queen of cheap. A makeup artist literally didn't make their flight. She was in New York. She didn't live here at the time. She was in New York, and she was presenting at the GQ Man of the Year Awards. And so her hairdresser at the time had said, you should use Jay. Oh my God, he's doing everyone he's worked with. He wouldn't say Naomi, knowing a little bit at the time, but I had worked with Naomi at the time, but Iman and all these people, and basically was saying, I worked with everybody.
You're not anybody if you don't work with Jay, so.
Well, not really saying it like that, but he was trying to say, he works with everybody, but he's also great. Women of color always say they want to make sure that this person knows how to do their makeup, especially at that time, it could go a little wrong. So she said, okay, well, I can try him out. He can come to my hotel room, which basically meant I had to come.
You were auditioning.
I was auditioning. So I came and did her makeup for free for an event.
Like, wait a minute.
And I tell millennials and Gen Zers this all the time, because a lot of them are like, wait, you want me to come do what? They don't want to do anything. They want to be in and out.
Yeah.
They don't want to put in extra time. And I said, my first job with Tyra, I did her makeup, which was basically a job for free. Showed up.
And I was a big makeup artist working with all the magazines and doing all the advertising and
doing advertising and making a great living at the time. And
I mean, I could afford to do it, but like, why should I?
Why should I? But I did. And we clicked. There was this, Tyra is the type of person where she lets very few people into her personal space, very few. And we clicked, and literally the next week, she booked me for Victoria's Secret. We were down on a Caribbean island shooting, and you kind of bond in that environment. And so when she came up with the idea for Top Model, she called my home phone, and I remember waking up at like 6:30 in the morning, and she was in LA, so I'm like, what are you doing up? It's the middle of the night. She said, I have an idea for this show, but I need you to help me with it, because you know all the photographers, you're out there, I'm gonna need you to produce on this. and you're gonna have to do my makeup because we're probably only gonna do one season, blah, blah, blah. I was like,
Oh, wow.
okay.
That's the understatement of a lifetime.
So I said, oh, yeah, sure. So we'll do one season. And even when we're shooting that one season, they said, if we're lucky, we'll get to do another one. We didn't know what it was going to be. And everyone forgets when it started, all the networks turned her down. And UPN was the only network that took it. And then that merged with, Warner's to create the CW.
We're talking about the Next Top Model, right?
Yeah, America's Next Top Model. And it became a global phenomenon. It still, to this day, airs in 158 countries on repeat, which is a little insane. And so when that show started, I was the jack of all trades behind the scenes because first season was low budget. I literally got
You had the title of creative director, so you had a great title.
Yeah, and I got that title in the middle of season 1.
Okay.
I didn't even start off that
untitled.
way. I started off untitled. They didn't know what I was. I did Tyra's makeup every day. I was working with the girls. I did the girls' makeup on set. I was creative directing behind the scenes because the producers were completely kind of fish out of water. They knew nothing about fashion. So it was kind of a weird production crew on that first season.
Yeah, because it was LA, so I can imagine.
We actually shot the first season in New
did.
York.
And they didn't know anything about fashion?
Well, that's just how it was set up.
There were so many people who did. It's,
It was just weird.
Yeah.
Like they felt like the real fashion people didn't want anything to do with this show because reality TV at the time
had a little bit of a,
It had a really negative connotation. All you had was the Real World, a Survivor, and then The Bachelor was starting, but it hadn't started yet.
You had Anna Nicole Smith, which was literally like a train wreck.
I don't think it had started yet when we started Top Model. Did it? I don't even remember.
Oh my gosh.
I think that was after us.
I thought it was around the same time. I have to tell you, she was literally like a train wreck. And so a lot of people were fascinated, but nobody wanted to be in one.
Oh no, and when they reached out to real fashion people, everyone said no. I mean, I know Tyra reached out to Andre Leon Talley early on and he was like, oh, absolutely not, never. And, I remember, Josie and people like that saying to me, you're doing what? Like you're throwing everyone said I was throwing my career down the tubes by doing the show.
I have to tell you something. I don't think working at any point in this industry is ever bad.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure,
Listen, I was doing television series and I had my friends in movies going,
TV.
I can't believe you're doing television.
Television, yeah.
Your career is over.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. I was a model who they said shouldn't do television, and now I got into television, and now you're telling me I'm an actress who shouldn't be doing television. I'm like, you know what? I'm a model, and I can do whatever I want to do.
Exactly, yeah.
And then the next season or the season after, that big the big movie actor was doing a television series.
Of course.
And of course, in the moment, they want to make you feel so bad.
So badly. Mm-hmm.
And do you wonder sometimes if that's just jealousy speaking?
Well, I think absolutely in our business there's a lot of jealousy.
Absolutely.
I think at the same time, if really looking at the business and the landscape, it was a gamble because, especially then, I was not only just doing makeup, but I was also working as an art director on a lot of shoots, and I was doing digital post-production work for very big companies. And so I think by doing this shift, there was the real potential to kind of lose a lot and not gain.
Your name would be up front and center.
Yeah, well, it was Tyra's show.
But still.
No one even thought that we, the main talent, would even be like a focus in the show. Think about it. When we're taping that first season, we were just supposed to be kind of support for her. And
so you weren't supposed to be on camera at all?
Well, no. Well, I was going to be on camera.
But like floating through? I mean, they introduced you.
Just kind of doing my thing. What happened halfway through season 1 when Tyra realized how much I was doing behind the scenes as a producer, and I was at all the production meetings, she basically said, next season he gets a producer credit and he should just creative direct. So in that first season, we flew to Paris to shoot 2.5 episodes. It was weird. And we took like a skeleton crew. Mm-hmm. And Tyra said, the photo shoot, set it up, run it, and you be the on-camera host for it because next season I want you to be the host of all that creative.
That was very generous.
It was. It was interesting. The way I just kind of felt like, all right, sure, I'll do this. And I just naturally just kind of stepped in and, because I was already with the girls, so it wasn't a foreign thing for me to do. And I just kind of stepped into that role. So everyone thinks that I was produced, even all the seasons that I did, I'm produced or I'm reading off cards or teleprompters. No, I was producing the creative. So when the girls walked in and I'm like, all right, girls, so today this is what we're doing. I was just doing what I was doing.
I can see you have no trouble talking. You're a very easy interview, I have to tell you. I'm enjoying this
I could talk
immensely.
your ear off, actually.
I'm enjoying this immensely, I really am.
Okay.
So, in general, was it easy for you to work with Tyra? Because not always is she easy. I mean, I love Tyra. She's always been really great with me.
You know, and here's the truth. I think I've been interviewed about my life on Top Model for years.
Ever since you were doing it,
yeah,
of course.
ever since I've been doing it. And, you know, I just feel like overall the experience was an incredible learning lesson for me. And it was an amazing opportunity that truly Tyra gave me. So I've always supported that.
Yes.
And her and I got along, and I know in her world, and I'm going to preface this with this, in her world, I was one of those very, very few close people allowed in. So to her, I was a friend. Mm-hmm. I had to be very realistic about my relationship with her. We were very close, but you know, Tyra was very focused on her world, and so it wasn't like I could really go to her with my things.
Yes,
Does that make sense?
No, of course.
And that's not a negative thing. I was just very realistic about what our relationship was. And I've never really talked about this because I think people have made a lot of assumptions because even while we were on the show, you open like Us Weekly and there's a huge sheet, picture of me and her, because there were all these rumors that her, like when I became, you know, very popular on the show, we weren't talking and there were fights
and there were
this.
The dirt.
They were looking for dirt all the time. And at the time,
you know, I have to say, I can't see you like getting into dirt. I really can't.
It wasn't that at all. There were no fights. There wasn't that at all. However, and I've never talked about this, there were some, also she continued to always support me. And let me first say, as the franchises started selling across the world, like Heidi still hosts Germany's Next Top Model and all these shows, Canada's Next Top Model was looking for a host. And Tyra actually, she has nothing to say in terms of picking the hosts. And they did their first season with Trisha Helfer, who's an amazing model, but she didn't, and she's an actress, but she didn't get into the world of, you know, really mentoring, hosting these girls, and it didn't really work for them. So they reached out to me because I guest appeared throughout that first season with Trisha to host it, and Tyra supported me. She said, oh my God, you should absolutely do it. It would be incredible. You know, so I went there, and because I knew how the show was produced, I got to take this international format and make it closer to the American format because I worked on the American show at the same time. And I wanted to cast it a little differently. I wanted to have the potential of real models kind of competing. And, you know, our real winner ended up walking, you know, big runways in Europe and all this kind of stuff.
That was actually a first because it's always been a complaint that I've heard in the industry.
With the American show.
Yeah, is that the girls never really were quite model caliber.
And actually some of the girls who have gone on and become really successful working models were always eliminated very early on in the show. And they went on and had careers.
Crazy, right?
So, well, it wasn't crazy. It was by design, really.
Really?
You know,
why?
I think Tyra really wanted to have a narrative behind changing the world's perception of what beauty is, and that was important to her.
Oh, interesting.
And so for her, when someone was, you know, too much of a model, she was afraid that would kind of derail her narrative, which I could appreciate.
That's very interesting, I have to say.
It was frustrating.
I'm sure it was because you see these beautiful girls knocked out early who you know have potential.
And I was the one
Did you go to them and say, listen, you got more potential than anybody else here, just go for it? Like,
yeah,
what did you do to help them?
I would speak with all of the girls as they're eliminated because I'm the one who spends the most time with them, you know, kind of in the scope of shooting.
That's so hard. I can imagine you got close to some of the girls.
Yeah, and I spend, like, our photo shoot days were 14 hours sometimes when you're shooting 13
go,
girls.
Right? Yeah.
And you had a lot of girls. So when they'd be eliminated, I would always speak to them off camera after they're eliminated. And so that narrative was something that was always difficult. And then as people started kind of focusing on me, and I, you know, ended up working for E for 7 years. I started at the same time as Ryan, and And then I became a co-host with Ryan and Juliana. I did all the red carpets. I did all that stuff. I was the only talent on the show who
Fashion.
No, who didn't actually have exclusivity in my contract.
Okay.
So I ended up doing that show. I had my own show on Style, and I started doing these other things. So then people started comparing me with Tyra, and then because of my time on the show, it was interesting because a lot of people would come up and say, "Oh, you're like the co-host," or like in was it like American Idol, Ryan was the host and they're the judges. Right. So people started seeing my creative director role as almost a host role at times, because I wasn't just hosting the photo shoots.
I was wondering, did that cause you to leave?
No, it didn't. It caused me at one point with doing as much as I was doing to say, I don't know if I can keep up doing the show, because we shot 2 of those a year, which is very time consuming. And so when my contract ran out, I basically said, I don't think I can do the show anymore, because also creatively, I felt like I did what I could do, because now the show had taken off. And for the beginning kind of 7 seasons, no one cared about what creative I was doing. So when we were in South Africa and we do a runway show with the illusion of the girls walking on water, and I built a runway that was submerged, all that stuff was, no one cared. Let Jay do what he wants to do. By around season 7, people really wanted to have input, because then they realized this show's gonna go.
And it's all based on this creativity.
Yeah, and then it was voices, network voices, producer voices, and what used to start off as a simple conversation, me and Tyra sitting down at a restaurant saying, I'm gonna do a shoot like this or this, and she's like, oh, that's cool, and let's keep it rooted in what models really have to do. Other than that, they let me do my own thing. Then it became this weird thing. So I felt like I did what I could do. And this is the thing I've never talked about. I said, I feel like I can't be on the show anymore. No one knows this story. Never talked about it. And this makes me nervous to even talk about it. I basically said, I can't do the show anymore. And my contract's run out. I'll give you guys time. You have about 3 months to find somebody. And that was the thing that Tyra did not appreciate. And we were very close for such a long time. Yeah. So what ended up happening was, and she always said to me, let's never talk through other people. Let's always just talk.
Direct, right.
So I thought she would understand. She knew me. It wasn't like I was supporting the show. I had done everything I could. I said, you guys will have time. I'll help you guys. Whatever you need. I think it's time for me to move on.
Transition out.
Time to transition.
Somebody in.
And she basically just shut me down. So she just said, yeah, I'm disappointed, and just decided to not speak to me. So this is where people have been trying to get to the bottom of the story, and I'll tell you the real story. I know my manager in the other room was like, oh God, I didn't know we were going here.
A safe place.
But the interesting thing was, I know they ended up screen testing a lot of people, and I know a lot of these fashion people, and the network felt they couldn't find someone. It wasn't just about a personality. It was about someone who could do the job.
And who could think, and who was creative.
And I would just often, even when we're rolling with things, you get into these moments with these girls, and I think like a producer, and we don't stop down, we just roll. So
I know they called you One Take Jay.
they do. I just kind of ram right through.
Ran right through it.
So literally I was doing this, and so this is like this awkward conversation now, but it's actually good to talk about it. Basically, the network came to me and said, we couldn't find somebody. We're getting ready to shoot in 2 weeks. We'd really appreciate it if you could do one more season. Mm-hmm. So, of course, what are you going to do? I already felt badly in a way.
You got to spread goodwill. It's the network. Mm-hmm.
So I said I would come back and do the season. So I came back to do a season. It was season 9, and it was. So I show up for casting, and everybody's like, "Great! Oh my God, we're da-da-da-da-da," and I'm doing the whole season, and I'm working like I normally do, and I show up on set, and that casting is just Jay Alexander, Tyra, and myself, and when we were on camera, the chemistry was exactly as we always were, but when the camera stopped, no.
heartbreaking for you.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, because you lose a friend, basically.
It ruined, first of all, it eroded my self-esteem in a way I would have never have thought could happen in my life. Because I really felt we had such a close relationship.
Right.
And she knows kind of like very intimately how I think and how I care for people.
Right.
Yeah. So when she kind of did that, I took it as I took it so hard. And that's why I feel like talking about this today, it's like, I could have given you a PC interview. We'd be out of here. It'd have been fine.
Heck no, I wouldn't let you get away with that. You're too interesting a character.
And people have tried to get to a real story. I just feel like now's the right time.
I'm glad, and I'm glad you feel safe here with me to do it because
we're in your living room.
We're in my living room.
You're in your living room.
My cat's running around. And
yeah, and it was. I felt so hurt. And I didn't know what to do. I just was like, how am I going to get through a season? I'm on camera with her so much. So
how did you get through the season?
My gosh, I went into probably one of the few times in my life I went inward and kind of went to like that kind of depressive tendency. And I'm not a person who gets like,
not.
I don't get depressed. I mean, everyone has bad days or a bad week or whatever, but this was
a bad season.
Yeah, I kind of got a little depressed, and it was weird because someone who I loved and cared about, I was now afraid of, which was weird.
And you had to work with.
And I had to work with.
So you're walking on the set every day with this trepidation and your heart pounding because you never know how she's going to react to you.
Well, what was great is on photo shoot days, she was never there. So on a photo shoot day, I could kind of step into my own and do my own thing when I would art direct the photo shoots. But then what I found that I was doing was I was trying to do everything to please her. So, I'm going to outdo this shoot in a way that she's going to look at it and go, oh my God, he's here 100% and I'll forgive him or something. I don't know. It was this bizarre, like weird situation. There were no fights, there were no arguments, there was no drama. But then
more subtle.
It was subtle. And then our abroad location, because we travel abroad for every season, was China. And we were in Beijing. We started in Shanghai, we moved to Beijing. Then when we were in Beijing, every season when we get down to about 4 girls, Tyra would want to do a photo shoot because she loves doing photography herself. Of course, she would have to work with me in creating whatever shoot she does. So I got a message. She wanted me just to come to her room and have a talk. Yeah, and this is like 2 nights before her photo shoot.
Oh my goodness, right?
So I go and I had this, I've never been nervous during an interview. I'm like so nervous because I've never talked about this.
I didn't think I ever made anybody nervous about talking about anything.
I think it's me reliving this story a little bit. It was so long ago, so I'm like, it's kind of one of those things you just kind of, I've forgotten.
It's good to just get it out.
Get it out.
Oof, let it go.
Yeah, so basically we had a talk in her room and you know, to her credit, she actually said, you know, as an executive producer, I don't think kind of the way I've behaved this season has been appropriate. You know, I should have. Awesome. Yeah, you know, I thought that was amazing.
Awesome.
And it was just her and me alone, no assistants, no other producers around. It was the real us. We had a real conversation. And remember, we would sleep over at each other's homes and all that. So it was kind of getting back to that moment. And so then she said, let me explain why I felt hurt. And she talked it out, and we had a good conversation. And we moved through it, and then from the next day, it was like things were normal again. She did her photo shoot, and with me on camera, and then it felt like really the 2 of us the way we used to be. And then we finished out that season, and then she asked me. She said, "So you did this one season. I'd like to know, you know, what's your decision? What are your plans? What are you going to do so that we can make plans?" And I said, you know what? I've been thinking about it, and you know, just give me a couple weeks, and let me just really kind of come to a decision. So I basically, called her up and said, I've decided I really want to continue with the show. And she said, great. And so kind of from then on, it was, it was kind of like status quo and just working the same way. And so I did another 9 more seasons of the show. And then I kind of reached a point again where my contracts, were done. And the show was really kind of starting to evolve and change. And I said, I think now's the time. And at that time, she kind of more understood it.
Right.
And but I'd always felt that one weird hiccup was that moment, which, and I don't know if there were leaks on set or whatever, that was the time when people were kind of reporting things, but I could never talk about it at the time.
Did you ever think in that moment that it was because she was hurt?
I did, but I didn't fully understand because I had explained it in a way where I said, I wasn't doing anything to her and I would help her in any way, and the show could really live on its own.
Somebody who leaves, it's always hurtful, no matter what the relationship.
I had felt that the show could go on
forever.
And it felt like it didn't need me.
Oh.
And at that time,
yeah.
and what I learned afterwards is
she needs you.
She said, well, and it wasn't so much her, but she felt she needed me, yes, but she also felt that I was one of those pillars in the show. And not only just on camera, but behind the scenes. And so she felt by me stepping out that potentially this could erode the franchise even.
Wow.
And there were all these fears wrapped up into it. And we have to realize when we speak with people, you never know what fears or what they're coming to the table with.
There's one thing I learned in acting that I always tell people when they're going through a hard time with somebody. It's the most basic of everything. All negative things come from fear.
Of course.
And if you can figure out what somebody's afraid of, you can help work through it. It's gotten me through so many times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time you're going through something like that, remember, all negative things come from fear.
Fear. And fear ultimately...
Not menace.
Fear. And fear is ultimately the anticipation of future pain.
Right.
That's why it's like people get ahead of themselves. And my kind of philosophy now is no matter what happens, you always have to stay present. Mm-hmm. And people say it all the time, but they don't live it. Like, so for instance, the most important thing that's happening right now is the conversation we're having.
Absolutely.
Right here in your living room. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing the rest of the day or what you're doing the rest of your day or what you're doing tomorrow.
It's being engaged.
It's being engaged right here. And that's what actually gets me through everything that I do now. But at that time, I didn't think with that philosophy.
Yes.
So I was constantly, petrified. It was a horrible, 12 weeks of shooting. I'll tell you.
It's some of these things come with age, I think, and maturity in the business.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're fearful yourself.
Yeah.
And here was a very important relationship for you with Tyra, and it was changing.
It was changing, and it has probably ultimately changed. I think. I mean, Tyra and I obviously, still talk. We still have a bond. When it's my birthday, I can guarantee you the first email that comes in on my email, it's her.
It's her.
And it always says, always says you, and then she writes an email. So, we stay in touch, and I was so happy when she had her son. It was so important to her, and I reached out, and so, but we don't have the same relationship we had, and obviously we're off doing different things, but we still at least have a relationship to some extent, which is good.
The thing is I always love creative people and innovators, mm-hmm. and it's so hard, of course, now in the industry to think of new and creative and innovative things. So to listen to your story about how you guys created this show, I mean, she had the idea, but she looked at you as an integral part of this. And that's got to, account for a lot.
At the time, it didn't initially because it was just like, sure, I'll do whatever. What can I do? And then I was the idea person. Let's do this. Let's do this. Now I look back on it, and again, 18 seasons. I mean, it was a long time, and I learned many lessons, which is great. So.
Yeah, I just find her awesome. I find you awesome. I mean, it's just, to really get a success like that is just incredible.
Yeah.
Talk about your clothing line. You then decided to open a clothing line, create a clothing line.
Yeah, I love fashion, and I got a wonderful opportunity to do a 3-year deal to take over an existing line and kind of it was called just Attitude, or the word Attitude. And so they gave me kind of complete control of the line for 3 years and do 6 seasons.
How fun was that?
To do Attitude J. Manuel. And I got to even rebrand the even shops within the shop to kind of create this look and feel. And the great thing was it was across Canada, and with Toronto Fashion Week, which is huge. I got to do full runway shows, just like we do in New York, like full scale, enormous. IMG
come out
was
at
the
the end
sponsor.
to take them back.
Yeah. And I was very, very involved. And it wasn't that I felt like, oh, I can sit, and I'm not a person who can draft a pattern.
Yeah.
I'm not a person who can draw a sketch, like
But
a
you have
great
an
sketch of, but I have an eye, and I worked with an amazing illustrator. And then I really learned the understanding of fabric and fit from my grandfather, who was a master tailor.
Yes.
And
I was hoping you'd speak about him.
he was very special to me growing up. And actually, this pinky ring is actually a ring. It was my great grandmother's wedding ring, and he wore it as a pinky ring.
Oh, are you kidding me?
And
How
when he died, it was passed on to my dad, ultimately for me. And he was a man of very few words. And he obviously was in South Africa. That's where my family's from. And if you could think about it, the time during apartheid, a master tailor who kind of rose in kind of in that community, and also ended up, got the honor of doing the Navy, the senior kind of, I guess, I don't know, the officers of the Navy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know the exact term, I'm sorry, but he would do all of their uniforms, but custom. Ooh. And then their formal dress.
I love uniforms.
And so, so I got to watch him the times I would travel to South Africa, and he would travel, but when I went there, I got to see him work. Yeah, and
you were around it your whole life.
Yeah, and I would watch him cut, and he wouldn't talk, and I would just, as much as I talk, I would just kind of sit there. Absorb. I tried to talk, and he'd say, "Child, shh." Yeah. So, and then I still have it to this day. My first suit I got was probably around 6 or 7, and we were going to a wedding, and so my grandfather made me a 3-piece suit, custom.
Beautiful.
And when you look at it now, it looks, and the way it's cut and finished, it looks like a Tom Ford suit. Just like a Tom Ford 3-piece suit.
You got to say style and class will always survive.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is always the way you should do your wardrobe.
Yes, and so except for today, I'm a little crazy.
No, I love this. This is beautifully cut, by the way.
This is like a fun fashion thing. But
I matched you. I went in my closet and I said, I have to find something that matches that suit.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's summer. It's lovely. So yeah, I and I still have that suit. It hangs in my dressing room. I love it. I love to see it, because it just reminds me of him. And so that is where I feel like I got the confidence, really came from him to do something like that. And so when I worked with all of the tailors, because I had a lot of suiting, I love women. I surround myself with power women, and I love women in suits. So for me, I felt like I wanted to open the show with a little bit of a nod to Yves Saint Laurent, but doing that kind of, that beautifully cut female tuxedo. I did one in white, I did one in black, with like a slight flare boot bottom and heels. And I really went at those with him. I felt like he was around me, really.
Oh,
and all the tailors were around me and saying, how does he know? Because I talk seam. I'm like, no, this seam needs to come in this way, it needs to be cut this way. Here's why. And you think
like,
I'd be doing fashion for years. But
so why did you stop after 3 years? I know it was a 3-year deal, but why only a 3-year deal?
Everyone asked that, and actually the big question.
Sorry, I'm asking a boring question, but I have to know.
No, people have asked me, and why I didn't do a menswear line.
Yeah.
And I don't think that part of my life is over. Maybe that next thing is going to come with the right opportunity, because I feel like it has to be the right thing. And
I could stop the interview here because that's where you're going in the future, but I want to know about your beauty line.
Oh, I have a couple things I'm working on.
2014, you opened your beauty line.
Yes, I launched, J. Manuel Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
That felt like it was the right time as well, because technology that is truly innovative that's coming out of Korea had reached a point where you could bring things in at a really competitive price point. And I was going back and forth to Korea to really come up with some very unique formulations and products that really build the core of my brand, which is the Filter Finish collection. And it was
Filter Finish.
Yeah.
Nice.
So before people started even kind of bringing that vernacular into the world of beauty, I trademarked the Filter Finish collection, and all those formulas underneath were patented. And there are a few lines, as now the trend of beauty is moving that way, they've tried to skirt around my trademark, and they'll call things like faux filter or whatever. They're like they're trying to get around it a little. But it ultimately is about the ingredients and the formulation there. I have a huge passion for great product. I mean, I traveled the world, and I realized my kit when I was a makeup artist comprised of things I bought around the world, really.
Mine too, yeah.
I'm sure you had the same experience. And so I wanted to kind of bring that to a product range that had a competitive price point. And so for me, that was very exciting. But I kind of feel where I'm ultimately going, the beauty line, my whole world, working on top model of as a makeup artist, really everything has ultimately led me to where I am today, which was something you brought up early on, and a thing that people don't realize. When I went to NYU, one of the things I did study was writing, and I, a few years ago, was digging in my storage room, and I found a small book, like something you would do, those little workbooks you get when you're in school, grade school, and had a cover on it with a really bad illustration that I did. But it was a narrative story, and I saw the title to it, and it was called A Wave That Brought Gold. And I thought,
wow, what a creative title.
Yeah, and I mean, I was a little kid.
Right.
And when I did this, and for some reason I had kept it. And for me, it felt like, maybe this is something I need to revisit. I never had aspirations of being a writer. And so I sat down with an idea, and I wrote it up, very short write-up, and it was, I took it to my agents, and they said, this is really a great idea. This is something, and this is kind of what I'm getting from you, the theme, I mean, this is only like a one-pager, is this is something that could be relevant right now. And really, my entire life, everything I've been through is what has led to this story. And so I was in the midst of launching my line, so I did some writing. I here off and on was doing all this research and digging and building. And now I'm at the point where it is now turning into something much bigger, and I'm starting to attach different people to this bigger project that is very exciting. And it has become probably the most fulfilling thing I've ever done.
That's awesome.
Never thought I'd ever say that about this, like sit and write for 14, 15 hours in your pajamas. Like, it literally became an addiction.
Solitude.
Yeah.
After being on a set with hundreds of people.
Yeah, it really became this addiction, and I can't wait to share the story.
I can't wait to hear it, and maybe we'll have to do round 2 with the J that brought gold.
Yeah, look at that. That was a good lead.
And I'm not even a writer.
No, that was great.
Thank you so much for being on the show,
you.
Jay. I really enjoyed speaking with you about this. I so appreciate you opening up about a lot of things that you've never spoken about before.
Oh, thanks.
And when the camera's off, I have a couple more questions, but I'm not going to talk about that now, and we will catch you next time on Carol's Living Room.